Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Midweek Program at the J.C. Raulston Arboretum. My name is Blake, and I'm the Education Assistant here at the Arboretum, and today we are in the very newest garden planted at the J.C. Raulston Arboretum. That's right, our tabletop texture garden. Well, not so much. We have a program for you today about texture in the garden. We're a little bit rained out right now. We are stuck indoors, but that is not a problem. We've got our research technician, Tim Alderton, here, and our other research technician, Evan Villani. They have pulled together this wonderful array of plants, creating a nice and very textureful garden here indoors. So we should have an absolutely wonderful program for you today. Those of you joining us on YouTube, please like this video and subscribe to our channel, and feel free to leave a comment down below. And with the announcements out of the way, I'll pass things over to Tim and Evan to teach us a little bit about texture in the garden.
So I think this came about more from you than me.
So my idea when we were moving inside was to get a bunch of different things that we could throw together and show you guys how to play around with texture in the garden. And what I mean is that you should not be afraid to contrast texture and to think about texture and form and shape of plants when you are planting, designing a small garden, or working on an existing garden and thinking about what do you want to throw in there.
It gives a different dimension. Aside from the flowers that you might be wanting, there's different seasonality in some of the textures you'll get as well, because some things will go dormant and you'll have a stick, others you'll have actual year-round evergreen foliage, and then some things that just have, just a softness to them throughout the season. So it's another dynamic part of your landscape, not just that, again, flowering or that structure that you have in there, that plain hedge. You can spice it up a bit that way.
So what we have before you is an example of a fine textured plant. So a fine textured plant usually has more dense foliage, and it has small leaves or thin leaves. And then over here we have a coarse textured plant, which usually has big monochromatic leaves, so big one colored leaves, and it's like boom, it's in your face, it's right there. And then right here we have something that's more in the middle. So texture is a range, and there's a lot of things that affect texture. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Some of it, we were playing around just briefly earlier. Actually, leave those there for just a second. Sure. I think we're going to consolidate this. And can we have you go to that different view of the world and see what happens and see if we can see it? Because these are all green at this point, but you can have different textures and different shades of green, but the texture, no, it didn't work.
It doesn't.
There we go. So the texture may stand out, even if, say, a few different, the same similar green shades, the texture is going to stand out. And the best we can do this is to go into, as we're saying, I guess, infrared in our camera that we have here at the Arboretum. We're playing around with it. We've never gotten to use it. Unfortunately, I might need to have this kind of down here like this and that. I don't know. Boom. But you can see some of the texture there, regardless of the fact that they're all just basically shades of green.
And that's a really good point.
Yes.
There are people in this world that are colorblind.
Exactly.
Like my sweet little niece, for example, and there are gardeners who...
Denny Warner, our former director, is red-green colorblind. Yeah. So they're seeing the world in grayscale, more or less.
For sure.
So those colors just don't pop like they do for the rest of us.
Here's the point that I want to make with this. So we can zoom in here, and if you want to go to black and white again, that's fine. But these are all more finer textured plants. And while there's contrast in color, and the adiantum is doing a little bit of work here.
It has a little more roundness to it.
Yes. Yeah.
Everything else has linear leaves.
But when you look at the whole thing here, it's a little bit almost messy. Except for the adiantum, nothing is really catching your eye. So let's see, if we take this out, it kind of just looks like a wash, right? There's 5 different unique, or 6
plants.
Yeah.
There's 5 plants there.
5 beautiful, unique taxa, but none of them really get to speak.
That hibiscus, actually. And let's take this out. And actually, we have some of the same color. I would leave that because we have some of the same colors here even, but we're having different texture.
I would get something with even more broader leaf.
How about the banana?
Sure.
Because it even, again, has that striping to it. Yeah, there's some more impact here. We have some of the same colors because actually there's some red picked up in the stems of this Muhlenbeckia and this Uncinia, this carex, variegated carex relative from New Zealand, and this Formium. Those all have similar colors, but We then have some of these more bold foliages with them, but they're also, again, picking up the color. So that's kind of it. Is throwing things, if they were all green, these would all still work together, texturally, and still give you some contrast there. We're still working on the same color palette here, but it's all this, it's different textures in there. We have fine, coarse, and intermediate textures. And we have different shapes of the leaves too.
Yes.
The paddle shape of the banana versus this acer-like or maple-like leaf on this hibiscus. And then we have this the lance-shaped leaves of the phormium and a little bit finer, grassier texture there. And then this wiry structure of the Muhlenbeckia, which gives you the zigzag, irregular appearance. So
this is a good opportunity also to put into words some of the things that we do here at the Arboretum, because it ends up being, we garden, we put stuff in the ground, but what is actually happening? If we could put it into words, there's different architecture. So as he was saying, the wiry nature of this plant is causing contrast. We talked about the leaf shapes causing contrast. And then also I want to point out the size of the plants. So this is acting as a very large structural element. And even if it was sitting way above these plants with its big leaves, having this as an understory, when you're sitting far back enough and you get to view the whole thing, it would still have that same
some layers, and you could repeat something. Let's see, do I have anything small but coarse? So actually the begonia. No, that begonia.
Perfect.
So that again picks up that same coloration with the red shades, but it's also picking up some of the larger leaf size that you're getting in with the banana, for instance. So we're keeping on the same colors, which again is just like having a whole set of different green shades here. You can still have contrast in the leaf structures here. Because our focus is the texture, but in this case we do have some color going on here.
And I would just like to point out the fervor with which Tim is pointing out this plant looks like this, and this plant looks like this, and this plant looks like this. Like
he's
that's
quite
happening,
good at that.
Yeah. Well, that's happening in your mind instantaneously when you see compositions like this. Like we're actually taking the time to put all that into words, which is kind of complicated because it takes a while to say all that. But like when you look at these texture compilations, like you feel it and you experience all of that all at once. And it's like, it's kind of something that we take for granted, but there's a way to kind of like suss it out and figure out what works with what and how they all talk together.
So here I've set up something where it's a mostly coarse texture. And once again, the hibiscus is doing the work here to add contrast to the composition, I think.
Yeah, because most of the others have a fairly simple leaf, unlobed. Everything, the hibiscus has a lobed leaf.
Right. So, but overall, when you combine a lot of different coarse textures, the composition is very busy. Your eye doesn't know exactly where to land, and so the things I would add to this is some fine backdrop.
You want this back?
I would love that back. Thank you. I'll take this. So I wouldn't have as many coarse elements, and I would introduce some symmetry. The fine textures, and even I think medium textures work just fine. And now, with a little bit of symmetry and a little bit of the finer textured plants, I think, let's see, does your eye settle on that more? I mean, the Eracema is really jumping out.
This is the Eracema in this case. And in a few months, this one would jump out. This would cover up everybody.
I mean,
This is our baby Thailand giant colocasia, which will have leaves the size of the table here. So, but anyways, I like the repeating of the shape of this rhododendron and the Litzia here.
Which has some literal texture as well.
They do. Both of these have hairs on, especially on the underside of the leaf.
Nice,
so this is speaking of texture, and you wrote in the write-up that we might be fondling some of the plants a little bit. This one in particular, the undersides of this is like a puppy's ear.
Yeah, it's quite nice. And so that is to say that symmetry and repeated elements don't have to be the exact same plant that you use in your garden over and over, but a similar enough effect. It could be a different size as long as it has a similar enough texture.
And here is kind of, I have something, I mean, I have a bright yellow. I'm gonna go like this just for now, just to set these in here. This is not great, but we're using...
I can hold them too.
This is from one of our Aesculus in the garden, and it has these palmate leaves. And then this is a Choisia, which also has palmate leaves. So
smaller.
Much smaller, different size, but it's going to repeat that shape throughout the landscape. You could have this similar things growing in there and do that. Probably it might work better with maybe, I don't know, We have a few things. Some of the maples might have a palmately lobed leaf, which would kind of repeat the aesculus, which actually, we had to go into cut material as well, because we weren't out in the garden, but or this might be another thing. This is not 100% the same, but it has that five lobes
enough
and
to echo the aesculus.
That shape. And in a shade garden, you could have a banana, you could have a Japanese maple, and an aesculus being the overstory, and the rhodies underneath it, and the begonias. So that's a very functional thing. And here at the garden, we do have an extraordinary collection that we get to play around with.
Yes.
I am not a true designer, and I just go around and I see what's in the nursery. And as long as it fits the feel for that garden, like the Asian Valley, we will throw things in and just design on the fly with what we have.
I'll say that Tim's being humble, and you really ought to see his flower arrangements, and you'll be like, "Yeah,
flower arrangements."
Tim's not a designer."
Oh, sure.
I make the whole garden in the bouquet.
Honestly, this is really cool. This is kind of like you guys are doing like a puppet show. You're like making a garden out of these different plants. I don't know. It's an interesting effect from a cinematography perspective.
I think also the advantage that Tim is talking about is that we don't have to think so much about availability of plants, which garden designers typically do, but instead we look
limited
first and see what we
aren't
have.
as limited. We limit ourselves to what crazy stuff we have in our collection.
So here we might have a garden where you have a large established Japanese maple, and then you have your slightly smaller but still significant oak leaf hydrangea
There's an
shrub.
understory, yeah.
And then here's your kind of like perennial arrangement. And in reality, the Stokes aster would fill in more, and some things would fill in more.
You mean acanthus?
Acanthus, not Stokes aster?
No, it's acanthus.
Okay, sorry.
It's his first full week as
you're right.
Full time here.
You're so
I
right.
get to pick on him.
So yeah, this is acting as like your structural understory planting. It's still going to be quite large, and it has a nice medium but leaning coarse texture. What's doing the work for it to make it interesting is how lobed the leaves are. And then so we have a fine fern contrasted with a very coarse acanthus. This is more of a medium texture. We have, once again, a coarse begonia. And then here on the left is another fine textured fern.
And this is something so many people, our volunteers tell us, I don't have any more sun left in my yard. After they've been in the same house for 30, 40 years, and they have overstory now. So they're always looking for shade. So this would be a cool one to try in your landscape. It's not necessarily for a new full blazing sun landscape, but this is something you can see the textures here. And I tell so many people, if they're shade gardening, go for texture. And foliage, do not worry about flowering.
Right.
Because aren't as many plants that are going to give you good flowering in the
full
shade.
Flower show,
Except for very brief times at different times of the year. Focus on that foliage because it's going to be there for so much longer in the season. So
yeah, it gives you much more consistent interest. Do you want to do one, or should I keep going?
You keep on going.
Actually, while we're assembling things, Sandy had a question.
Sure.
It says, thoughts and guidance on seasonality. When something is in bloom or dormant, if it's an herbaceous perennial, is that how do you consider that factor?
I mean, bare spots in the garden are not necessarily a bad thing.
Okay.
I mean, if the thing has died, it gives it different times of the year. You can always have something else in there as an underplanting. It's like this Amsonia that I have right here. It's now finished flowering, but it's bare in the winter. There's nothing there, but you could have it underplanted with a bulb. And that gives you actually a different season there. Sure. And it would perfectly cohabitate with narcissus or crocus or something like that. And so that can fill that void because this is a full sun plant. And in the winter, there's a void in that spot. And just fill it with another a season of plants. Even with deciduous shrubs and things, that provide shade during the summer. You can have a different palette there through, we have hellebores, which are great texturally speaking for that foliage. And some of the newer hybrids have really a lot of substance to the foliage, whether just thicker, but some of them also add variegation, which we didn't used to have, which isn't necessarily the texture, but it can give the appearance of texture because the veins are actually on them. You actually see what these veins that are oppressed normally, they actually stand out. So it makes another depth, it's much more depth there to that. So, but I came up with a little hand arrangement here using some of the stuff I had cut. And this is the choisia here, this yellow, which even if this, let's see if can I get you to go black and white? So yeah, look at that. The choisia here stands out totally with this verbicena, which these are both Mexican in origin, and as is this plant here. This is an aloysia gratissima, which ranges from the southwestern United States the whole way down to Argentina. It may cohabitate with different species of Amsonia, or another thing that would grow with these would be Chalopsis linearis, and to give this similar appearance. So these are just some plants that may get the same same climatic conditions that you might find them growing in, and it gives something really cool. But you can see the difference in the textures that you get in your combinations.
So yeah, so one coarse textured plant is doing the work to backdrop all this
these
stuff.
other things. I
Really
have a medium with the choisia, and then a bit finer with the linear leaves of the Amsonia, and super fine with the flowers and leaflets on this aloysia. So
Sandy had an interesting question.
Sure.
She wants to know if you were each innately or subconsciously always doing this kind of thing, or is this a learned skill?
It's a learned skill.
for me, I think it's innate.
Do you?
I just throw things together.
I agree with both of you, honestly. Personally, it was a learned skill for me. So I do bonsai. If you saw the bonsai trees that I did when I first started, they're trash. They're rubbish. Like it was not good, but it's something that you stick with. You practice over time. You learn what works. You learn what doesn't work, and you just keep doing what's good. And you do learn. However, some of us are gifted at
But other things I'm totally
He's probably also
deficient at.
much faster at doing it as well.
So for me, like our interns who started on Monday, I've been quizzing them on plant families. That just I don't have to think about that.
Sure.
And I've been.
But I know people's names pretty well.
I can't do people's name,
Okay.
but I can do plants and how they're related. So it's kind of the
fair.
same way with this. I'm
Sure.
perfectly fine with this. This is second nature for me.
One of our floral arrangers, Marty, she's got
Oh my
such
gosh.
a good eye. She's amazing, but she doesn't
all the
realize
amazing
how
things.
amazing she is at it.
She's so humble.
No kidding.
She's
But-
always walking around with like the most beautiful handful of plants. I'm like, where'd you even find those? I didn't even.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
So like for some of us it is innate. Some of us are gifted for it, but if you're not all hope is lost. Like this
That's right.
is something you can learn. This is something you can get better at even if you're born with this skill, like as you practice it, you will get even better, which is always phenomenal.
Sure. So I have your fig is creeping over this way into the garden because figs do that. But your main tree here is a cercis, and underneath the cercis you've planted this plant that's related to buxus,
Yep.
a barberry, and then some carex, some achillea, some yarrow, and then this big coarse textured colocasia, which makes a big visual impact and mirrors the heart-shaped leaves of your cercis. So that was kind of my thinking there.
I'm looking at the pinnately compound prickly leaves of my Mahonia Freemantii.
Oh, that's a Mahonia.
Yeah, I mean, they try to lump them into Berberis, yeah. And I did a whole talk on Mahonia, and Mark and I did a whole talk on Mahonia in, I think, March or February. But anyways, this one might not like this plant. That's the only thing.
Right, yeah, because that's another good point about big-leafed plants. They take damage fairly easily. So
I mean, this
spiky
one's a
things,
moist
buggy
grower. Well,
things.
this is I collected this outside of Moab, Utah, so I know where that came from.
Okay.
So it's saying, I like it hot and dry. And
Right.
actually, this, I believe, is one of the Eurasian, or Western European, or Western Asian, Eastern European species of, I think
Like
it's either
dry
that or is this the California species? I can't remember where this red bud's from. But this is not one that is overly happy for us here in Raleigh.
Aw.
Yeah.
This is urbiculata, Cercis urbiculata.
So before you think about texture or anything, you want to make sure your plant selection is where it likes to be. You have a spot you want to plant, number one thing.
But you can experiment and you can torture things just like I do.
true.
I kill things.
And then be willing to like pick it up and move it to a different spot in your yard and say, I'm sorry for putting you there.
But I do love the shape of this, and even the wiry stems on this is a great contrast because it's very open. This kind of, where is that Muhlenbeckia at again? the wire plant.
That's right.
Right next to you.
Here.
So in reality, to me, these have a very similar structure. It's just one's enormous and the other's not. You get almost a zigzag effect and with little orbiculate leaves on both of these. It's just it's a size difference. So these would work really nice to mirror or combine down in here to bring that structure down here.
Now we're talking.
On that, and actually I think this would go fairly well with the fig too, but that anyways.
Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna move on to some spiky stuff. So
we can all have different. We all see different things or things differently, and so you get to experiment and express yourself in how you do these things.
Oops.
Ouch! 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 Evan didn't want to mess with this, but I did. I'm going to do my flower arranging method, and that's actually a really good way of playing around. Sometimes talking about touching and texture is we're actually interacting with the plant, as far as I'm concerned, is another thing that is very important. And this plant right here, which you can use this as a filler. I don't know if you can see that. This is a favorite plant of mine. This is Artemisia Pois Castles. Very ferny leaves. It's silver. It's soft. It's a great edging plant. And it's fragrance. It's just a totally different thing going to texture, but just it's very touchable. And going to texture, touchable is an important thing. It doesn't mean these different textures can't be interacted in that sense, not just visually, but in a tactile experience as well. So it doesn't stand out real well in here, especially since it's wet. But very different, this fine texture against the Verbicena, which this Verbicena only gets about 10 to 12 feet tall. It's about 6 feet tall already, and it'll get another 5 or 6 feet tall before the end of the season. But another plant that I like to use, and it has multiple textures to it, depending on which way the leaf is pointed at that time, is this Buddleia loricata, which I don't know if you can see it on there. The leaves on this have oppressed veins, which are netted, and it's really pretty. But the other experience is when, I don't know if you can see the underside of that.
Stone.
Yeah, it's silver. It's dark green on silver. And I always talk about this plant, whether I'm using it for Aretha workshop or in a flower arrangement. It's wonderful, but it's also a great landscape plant. Don't expect this Buddleia to be the most standout in flower, though. This is the spent flowers, but the flowers don't look much different than that. They're small and white and very short-lived, but I grow it as a textural. It just has this arching habit. It's graceful. It's evergreen. The leaves are never all totally facing the same way, so you get the experience, the silver fuzziness of the underside, and then the glabrous but rugose or netted venation that you can see on the top side of the leaves. You have to be close up to experience this, but that is another of the textural things I find very important there. And this is a fun one here. We are getting a big collection of eryngiums in the garden. This is one we've had for decades, though. And the base of this plant looks much like a Dazzlerion. So it's very spiny, but this is actually a carrot relative, and this is the inflorescence starting to go up. And this one's quite mean, but gets about 6 feet tall when it's in flower, maybe a little bit taller. Very open. Each of these inflorescences is going to branch out into a very open structure. And
they would if you cut it.
Yeah, and I have more of them. And they're also round. So, I mean, against these very sharp leaves, you have these round inflorescence, compound inflorescence. So it looks like little golf balls actually hanging on here. So, it's a very different texture. It's airy, but it's above everything else. And then, so there's just some different things you can experience, and you can work with these in your landscape to give you a different texture.
I'll move on to the specimen plant here. Or not really a specimen, but it allows us to talk another way about texture, which is that a variegated plant may appear to have a finer texture or a different texture. This looks to have a wavy leaf, but it's completely smooth. It's just the pattern of those parallel stripes make it look like it's curled. So it's just fun things to think about.
Is that a Drimia? I can't remember what that is.
Let's see.
We actually have it planted right out here.
Well,
is it Drimia?
No.
Oh, we have to break the label up.
And I just broke it more. So
broken it more. Anyway, it's a little hyacinth relative from South Africa.
Yes.
And it's just a cool looking thing, but yes.
Yeah.
And the other thing, some of these you might not use in your ground in the landscape. So you can actually incorporate these into containers. And that's another way that you can have a mobile collection of different textured plants that you can actually work with. You can have them on your deck or in a patio seating area. And you can, if it's a hot, dry area, we have some plants here that would grow very well together. Now you've got this in the right spot.
Right.
My Mahonia Freemanii there, but we have some aloes here, and I'll let you talk a little bit about that.
I will.
You were going into
before I talk about this, I will point out that Tim did say his talent was innate. However, I would say that you can have talked about that Orangium so much if you hadn't planted it and seen it.
Yes, exactly.
Right. So it's all about
you learn. You have to learn
how
how to use what you have available to you. So,
right. But here we have a dry, sunny condition, and so we have the nice round barrel cactus, notocactus.
That one's is that a noto? Yeah, that's a notocactus, a South American one.
And then we have again the Mahonia, adding a nice fine filling texture. And then so it's the symmetry here is these two different.
You have one that's upright, and they have the other one that's relaxed. Right. It still have that star-like structure.
Thick, spiky leaves, the triangular-ish leaves. And then this is just something totally different behind it with thick, rounded, long leaves. So I think I like this.
And this I would keep in containers because this one's going to want water.
Right. Yeah.
But the rest of that you could cohabitate quite well. But again, this one's not going to, these don't want to be out for our winters, unfortunately. I've killed a lot of aloes over the years.
Yeah. Even in permatil?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We do have a few in the garden that survive, but I don't think either of these would make it. We can try killing them. But,
another thing that I thought of while he was showing the Buddleia was that you also, it's not a bad idea to have plants that when the wind comes through, they totally change up your garden. So having something with the silver undersides of the leaves or grasses with long flower stalks that when the wind comes, it gives you a total sense of movement.
And I guess earlier someone was asking me about seasonality.
Yeah.
So conifers.
Let's do conifers.
We don't have a lot of conifers in here, but this is one. I don't remember which one. This is actually I didn't look to see what this. This is a thuja, an arborvitae, I believe, if I remember right, that we have in the garden. But the cones on it.
Yeah.
You have the fine texture of the scaly needles, but then these cones just stand out from that, and those are going to turn brown in the winter, but it's going to stand out from that
for sure.
That evergreen foliage, which you're going to have two different textures there.
Yeah.
They're rounded versus these flat, planar branchlets. It's almost fern-like in contrast to that. So you do have that going on there, and it's very different. And you can get that with a lot of different conifers that we grow here in the Southeast.
For sure. And if you really nail the texture between various evergreen species, that kind of smooths out any gaps you might have in seasonality.
Yeah.
So you may have flowers for just a couple of weeks, but if you got well-constructed background and texture, basically being your workhorse throughout the rest of the year, keeping it interesting, giving you something to look at while you're waiting for flowers.
Let's see what else we can come up with.
We've used most every plant that we grabbed. Maybe some.
I have a few things over here. And my pile of foliage.
Yeah.
So now there's a different challenge, which is using them in different combinations than we thought of.
So actually, this is one which worked really well. We have
color-wise too.
We have a patch of giant cane in the garden.
Who knew?
Yeah. And I do have some hibiscus fairly close to it. I don't have this one there, which I'm thinking I might have a hole I can fill. That one might work. And this hibiscus is a dark-leafed one. I've been wanting this plant for like 2 or 3 years. It's just become available finally. This is a hibiscus with dark foliage and a pure white flower.
Okay.
Yeah. So that would look really nice when this is a 6-inch flower against, we're not doing color necessarily here, but the textural difference between the round flower, the acer-like leaves or these lobed leaves, and then the contrast of this grass in the background in the middle of my perennial border.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And so this is an oversized plant. The flowers on this are oversized as well. So it's going to help balance that as well. But they're different textures, different forms of anyways. So that would look really cool.
It really would.
And then, I don't know, right now, someone else said about, I was asking about seasonality again. Alliums are great because they are winter or late winter, early spring active on some of the bigger ones. I mean, we do have summer flowering ones, but this is one that flowered for us about 2 weeks ago when it finished up. This is one called Allium Ambassador. But we're left with flower or seed stalks on about 4-foot stalks. But if you don't cut them like I did here, they'll stay there for quite some time. But the foliage can stick up through things. You might put it at the base of this hibiscus and you'd have that sticking up until the hibiscus got big enough. Yeah. And it's going to hide the foliage as it goes dormant.
Yep.
So, I mean, in purple, this is actually purple when it flowers. So if you had the newer emerging foliage against that purple, above that dark foliage.
There's some in the garden right now. There's like a little plot of like 7 of them right in front of the arundo.
Gigantea. It's right in front of this, yeah.
And that color combination is super duper, to say the least.
And I don't know if I intentionally planned that. I just throw things together sometimes and they work sometimes. Other times, not so much.
Sure.
So I thought of a fun game, which is to put a plant on the table, and then Tim picks something to contrast it well, to show it off.
So actually, Akuba and have these fairly large, bold, variegated foliage on them. They might be big splotch like this, or just the delicate speckling on some of them, or it may be pure green. But in contrast to a lot of the ferns, and favorite fern that we actually, I don't know if it's hard to see. You might not be able to see it through the window here, but we have this fern out here. This is Woodwardia orientalis. It's enormous and just grow that at the base of a large Akuba, which actually the better ones are right behind you. And no, if we
they're
just hold up the frond. That thing is amazing.
Put it flat against the camera. Yeah,
it is just spectacular, but very different structurally to the Akuba, but it would perfectly cohabitate with that. You just have to be patient. The first couple of years, they don't get quite this large. It's taken about 8-10 years, but each individual plant's about 8 feet wide and about 4 feet tall. And the individual fronds are 4 to 5 feet. So, and this one's another one, and the texture changes over the season because this one will actually get plantlets on the leaves, along the
it's not a leaf.
Oh, it is.
It's a part of
it's
the
not
frond.
quite it's on the leaflets on the frond, more or less. Pinnae, thank you. That's
There
the
it
one.
is.
Along the
Thank you
pinnae,
for the rest.
you'll get little plantlets on it. So it'll change throughout the season on the same leaf. So it's not stagnant. And actually, and I like that. That's another, this is going to stay much smaller and you cohabitate with that. The carex down there in the front would also be another thing that would work really well with this. And the begonia. Let's get that begonia. So, and you have those, but that would echo, this is going to be up here, and have the bigger, this Cote, I think that's Cote, Cote Castillon, which the leaves on that begonia get quite large. When it's happy, they will be about like this big. And that leaf there, this would be a really nice shade garden collection. And you can get away with that here in Raleigh.
Yeah, I was gonna say, so another good way to play with texture in the garden is to once you have your ideas, come get Tim to.
I'm not a designer. I work with the oddball plants, not that run the mill stuff. No.
The available stuff. And on that note, probably don't corner Bryce Lane in an elevator. He's very approachable, but he probably would not like to be cornered. That's his alone time. Should I grab one more? Did you get the abelia?
I did not get the abelia yet, and right there in front of me. Yes. Oh, and I broke my Eringium. Okay. Oh, I was gonna get this because we didn't do much with flowers.
But flowers do change the texture of a plant. Like
yes.
This salvia one, it gets covered in flowers.
And I broke the spike on it, but it's not bad. But the spike itself is totally structurally different from the foliage, and it changes when they are first emerging, they have this little downward twist to them. And this is off of our Salvia amistad, which is it dies to the ground each winter. It's only about 5.5 feet tall right now. It only gets about 6.5 to 7 feet tall by the end of summer. And it's about 8 feet wide. It's a nice clumper, but totally changes throughout the season. And this is, again, something that you could plant something for the winter months underneath it. But full sun, evenly moist soils, and these are great. But I love just the florets on the inflorescence are totally different from texture from the foliage itself. So you're getting something that's coarser and then something fine that comes out over it. And again, with going back to another plant that we had earlier, the Gaultheria down here, which had the flowers on, that was kind of what I was going with. These I wouldn't put as combinations, but look at the different aspects of the plant, the flowers versus the actual foliage. We didn't bring any of the in here, but something that has that are some of the coral bells. You have a low-growing orbiculate leaf for the most part, or maple-shaped leaf, depending on the selection, that is there all season long. But then in the spring and early summer, you get these tall, airy, very structurally different texture to the whole plant whenever it's in flower. So it's going to change throughout the season. And we were kind of almost getting that on this acanthus as well, because the leaf versus the flower stalk is quite a bit different structurally speaking.
One more.
What do you want? Okay.
The last thing I was going to do is put the abelia behind this.
Okay. Oh, here. Do you want the abelia? Here's your abelia.
Yeah. I think it's missing something.
The key thing is don't be afraid to play around with things.
Yeah.
Is what I would say. I mean, you can make something that's going to be coarse or too overly coarse or overly fine, and it may look great to you.
Yeah.
It's just, I'm not a designer. I won't complain.
That's a good point. Beauty is completely
It's
subjective.
all in the eye of the beholder, but
Yeah.
you can spice things up by combining these things.
For sure.
So.
There are rules that you can follow to help get.
But they can be broken as well.
And they can be broken. And if you love it, that's the only thing that matters, really.
So don't be afraid to play around and
Yeah.
use what you have available. We probably have 50 different things here at least. You may be only working with 5 to 10 different things, or even less than that. But try to have some diversity in your landscape, both in the structural aspects of it as well as the type of plants you have in there. And it's going to be much more welcoming to you. It's going to look more pleasing to others as well. It's also going to be better for the wildlife. It's more inviting to them. That is to insects as well as birds are going to want to come in there with those different structures as well. So,
Tim, what do you think of this? This isn't. I know it's either missing something or something's wrong.
I don't know. I think this should be fine here because this gold versus the and small leaves versus the pinnata-fid leaves of the acanthus versus the rounded leaves of the rhododendron. And these are actually all fairly cohabitate
Right.
in reality.
I'm trying to be realistic-ish.
Yeah, this is fairly realistic. I hate to say it, because this will take part sun to sun.
I'm thinking
this is a part sun to sun as well. This can take a little more shade, a little more shade
These would
for
like
us in the
full
roadie.
sun though to fill out though, wouldn't they?
Some of the you can get away with part shade for some of the smaller growing. Chemiciferous, piciferous. The yarrow would be the only one that might not appreciate as much, but part shade to sun, yes.
I might
it's more on the sun side, so, but yes.
And when it flowers, it might add another whole element.
Exactly, and not everything's going to be going on at the same time with that.
Right.
Because the acanthus is going to be mainly early spring, or not early spring, early summer, and then you can get into the yarrows, which will be late spring and early summer. So it's going to extend that interest as well. Yeah. And the flatness of the inflorescence on the yarrow is going to be very different from anything else in here. So that's going to be another contrast.
And I do like using conifers as a kind of it's a very stable thing. It's a year-long interest. Very consistent. It's got a super fine color and it has visual weight to it.
Yes.
So it's something that you can consistently use as a focal point or as symmetry in what's between it.
Something to repeat.
Right.
Yep.
Yes. Repeated elements. Okay. I think.
Yeah.
We'll take
Cool.
questions.
Yeah, do we have any questions?
Let's go. We'll start with a comment from Irene. She says, composition is hard enough in a painting or drawing. Can't imagine how hard it is when components grow and change.
Yes. Yeah.
I think art on a painting is much harder because, I guess a painting changes too as you paint it. But design by maintenance is a thing that we do here and should be done everywhere, is that the garden grows and changes. And as you prune, you can make different selections, or you
can let things grow out, and you're gonna start out with a full sunny spot. In a few years, you get part sun, and then you get shade. So you can change your whole palette of plants over time. So,
for sure. And you're a bit freer in the garden with plants because as far as composition in a painting, you are bounded by the edges of the painting. Whereas in a garden, it's just like whatever perspective the person's coming from is the perspective they're coming from. It's correct. And it's like you can see it from all these different ways. And it doesn't need to be bound by the frame. Like it just needs to be experienced however it gets experienced.
Right. And some plants do a great job also speaking for themselves. So I don't have to like do anything to make it look nice. I plant it grows, and then it's like hey, I'm doing this, and it's no longer me. So, yeah, it does the work.
They're dynamic. They change. I mean, plants aren't stagnant.
For sure.
And that's what sometimes we want them to be stagnant, but they
kidding.
Yeah.
But they're not. And if
they're
you just
not cookie
accept
cutter.
that they're not, then you can see the interplay throughout the season as they grow and how they talk to each other as they start to look different. So it really is just another dimension to it that makes it really fascinating. So
and we've talked here about more of the home landscape, so like an acre or less. But when you're talking really big pictures and you start getting to plant communities, that's a whole other beast.
And you might want to do more repetition. I hate to say it, in a commercial landscape versus in a homeowner.
When you're talking big swaths of land, people, if you're biking by, driving by, it's different than a garden where we have paths that wind and you're supposed to look
It's much more intimate.
Yes, this is more intimate. And so you can have a lot more contrast versus if you're working in a big swath of land, you do communities, repeated elements to a higher extent.
Yeah.
And we also didn't talk about formality versus informality.
Oh, sure.
You've taken design classes, haven't you?
I haven't. Go Pack, NC State. So in a formal garden, you'll have a lot more repeated elements, and you'll have plants that are usually tight, that behave more, or that you hedge and prune. Versus in an informal garden, you want to have things that are more inviting, a little more chaotic, but you never want to have too much of either thing. There should always be some repeated elements in an informal garden to tie things together, but there shouldn't be a formal garden that has no specimen plants and is completely bland. You don't want that either.
Sure.
So specimen plants being the key thing.
Oh,
You
yeah.
can throw in a formal garden and it doesn't mess with anything. It just it's one thing that draws your eye.
Definitely.
All the repeated elements.
Gives you something to look at. Tells you where to start and where to go from there, for sure.
Right.
Cool. Okay. Jared says he's terrible at this type of stuff, but he's curious if you ever consider non-foliage things as texture, like exfoliating bark.
Yeah, actually,
yes.
things like early on the hydrangea quercifolia there, and an older plant, especially in the winter months, when it goes partially deciduous to deciduous, depending on your climate, you'll start to get exfoliating bark. The grasses, they may turn brown and die to the ground through the winter months, but you're still going to have that foliage there. And you can see things like on your trees and stuff through the winter months much differently than you do in the summer months when they might be surrounded by something that's herbaceous and it hides that. But you can accentuate that in the winter by changing out, cutting down some of the herbaceous stuff that might be around them, or it gives you a whole different perspective.
And I personally believe that ornamental grasses are the unsung heroes of wintertime while they're still up in brown, because I don't know, I always think of like the sound of wind in the wintertime.
But sound is another dynamic.
Dead leaves.
For sure. Yeah. And it's like the grasses are there waving in the breeze, making that noise for you, and that visual structure.
It's another time. It's a texture in the sound.
No kidding.
So there's another texture there, and it's not just visual texture. It's not the
seed pods too. That was
with the allium, for instance,
for sure.
Or the cones on the conifers.
I'll touch on the bark thing really quickly, which is that as you develop a garden, and this is more like a shade garden thing, I guess we'll limb up trees and canopies, but is to have your herbaceous layer only come up so high, and then to limb the tree up slightly higher so that you're getting a few feet of just that visual bark. And there's a lot of good
crepe myrtles.
Oh, that's the one we think of.
That we have so much of here in this area.
Yeah,
but any of the crepe myrtle, the larger growing crepe myrtles,
have fantastic bark.
Have fantastic bark.
Platanus, although they don't do as well here. Some of them, like sycamore, has really.
Oh yes, platanus. Yes, that is a great silver appearance to it. I mean, some of the elms even can give you some great bark. Oh, or even oaks, which are a predominant tree here in the city of Oaks of Raleigh, they can have, depending on the species, the bark varies, and that is a totally other dynamic and textural experience.
Definitely.
As well. So.
Carolyn would like some suggestions about what works with bearded iris after they've bloomed.
After they bloom, so it's just the foliage.
Oh.
Yeah.
So
you need something that comes up
spiky-
late. I hate to say amorphophallus. It would cohabitate in that
Sure.
same space because they are just starting to push up now.
Yeah.
And the big leaves that come up on a amorphophallus konjac, and it'll take sun or shade, despite the fact that so often they say they take shade.
Yeah.
It's just a fun plant, and it might not totally hide the iris, but
Sure.
it's gonna give you some other visual to look at
Yeah.
that time. You could also fill in with some annuals, actually. It's not the end of the world to have to use annuals, and just use something that's gonna be, trying to think what would work. Some of the ornamental grasses again. You could put some of the tender ornamental grasses. I would actually go with a pennisetum, and let's see, I have to think, the red-leafed pennisetum, and I'm blanking, it's kind of rubrum.
Yeah.
It's not Alopictroides,
Okay.
but one of the red-leafed pennisetums.
Right.
And so that's not going to be there the rest of the season, but it would kind of airily cover up the adjacent areas to your iris through the summer months when they are going down, and it would kind of give them a little bit of protection from excess moisture. So.
My thoughts while you were talking were, I mean, you could fill in with Achillea or
yarrow would actually work in among that.
Phlox.
And phlox are going to be a little more challenging, because, at least the tall phlox, because they are a very permanent plant. And if you try to dig them up, they will come back up with a vengeance from the roots.
Right.
The
It's a
yarrow,
very thick
you
mat.
also need to divide periodically, which the iris would very much fit in with that, because you have to periodically divide those iris to keep them growing. And at the same time, you could divide the yarrows, and they will quickly recover from that division and look pretty nice.
And the other thing I was thinking was alocasia.
Actually, yeah, that would be great, because that is going to come up in the same location. The only thing with that is it might want a little bit more water than the iris would really want through the summer months.
Okay.
The iris are going to go down. You might risk rotting them, or or having a stunted colocasia or elephant ear.
Right.
Cool. Well, that appears to be all the time that we have for today. So thank you so much, Tim and Evan, for pulling together this wonderful presentation. Very energetic. Lots of plants to look at, a lot of fun, but like a lot of really good information to learn from it too. So thank you so much for sharing all that.
Great. Yeah.
And thank you everybody for joining us on the midweek program. We will be back again next week doing something, surely. We will be going, we'll be going deeper in the garden with Greg. He's going to be talking about roses. So that should be all kinds of special. We will see you all next time. Y'all take care.